Welcome to another episode of Bringing Jesus Back into Focus, a great spiritual teacher of enlightenment, the same as Buddha. 400-500 years after Buddha, different country, different religious base. Buddha came out of the Hindu multi-god tradition. Jesus came out of the dualistic two-headed god religion of the Jews, where they worship two different Yahwehs. They're two completely opposing gods. There's a war god and a god of peace. The Romans called their war god Mars, brutal, violent, killing war god, where they invaded countries and killed and stole the land. The Jews did exactly the same thing, and they called that war god of theirs Yahweh, one. You've got to say Yahweh, one. Because the Romans were honest. They had another temple, another god called Pax, god of peace, love. Help yourself share things with your neighbouring country. Don't make war with them. That's the god of peace, a different god, a different force. That's the white light god, the god of light and white. The dark, filthy god of Mars is the same dark, filthy Yahweh one war god. The Greeks had Ares, their filthy war god, and Irene, their god of love and peace. The Egyptians had their filthy war god, Sekhmet. Sekhmet, Ares, Mars, and Yahweh one are all the same genocidal, murdering, revengeful, just evil, satanic war gods. And the children who worship those in those temples go to war to kill and murder and steal. And they all did it, and the Jews were no different from anyone. But the Jews, unfortunately, were deceitful and liars, because they said, let's call our God of love, not by a different name, like the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, and everyone else, who were honest. They knew it was a different force. The Jews said, let's call this loving God, love your neighbour as yourself. Even love a foreigner who is amongst you as if they are Jewish, and love them as yourself. That's a different God. That's the God that Jesus drifted towards and into and became at one with. Now that God should have been called amore, or love, or whatever the Jewish word is for love. They should have called that God by a different name and built another temple, two temples. But they were dishonest and deceptive. They put both the gods, the opposing gods, the dark, evil God in with the good, loving God, and they put them in. And they said there's only one God, two-faced, two gods, opposing forces, opposite gods, completely opposite, both called Yahweh. I was born into the Jewish Christian Catholic Church in 1957. I left when I was 16 or 17 because of this lie they were teaching, that the Jewish God's the same divine source of pure love. Jesus was only with the divine, loving, spiritual creator of love, whose entire consciousness and mind is love. Heaven's a place of love. Everything there is harmless. Jesus himself was harmless. He said, if you see me, you see the loving spiritual creator of the heavenly spiritual dimension. It's another dimension. You've got another body to leave this body in, providing it's alive and well. And that's his main teachings. You've got a spiritual body. Those who are dead should come back to the spirit, because that's the one that's going to leave at death. So I always say to Jewish Christians, stop worshipping Yahweh, because you don't understand it. You're worshipping two gods, and one of them is a satanic war god. Jesus himself said. He said himself to the Jews, you're worshipping a war god, a satanic war god, and you do the murdering and lying and deeds and filthy things that the war god drives you to do, such as the slaughter and genocide at Jericho. That's not Jesus, and it's not the divine source of love that Jesus was at one with. So I had to, I never bothered about this because I knew Jesus was love and non-violence. But then in these last 5 years of my life, after my family duties have been fulfilled and finished, I thought, I wonder how everyone's teaching about him. To my shock and horror, I went into these churches where they were teaching just a complete load of rubbish about him. And so this is the book. Mind you, they've all got good charities. So the trouble is they've mixed the new wine with the old wine, which Jesus said not to do. So they've got Jesus there who's loving and kind and care for each other. And I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. I was naked, you clothed me. So all these Jewish Christian churches, including the Catholic Jewish Christian Church, they all have these wonderful charities, but they're only based on Jesus. And they're only based on the divine loving life force of the loving creator of the spiritual universe and spiritual world. They're not based on Yahweh. Half of Yahweh, you might say, or the other God, the other Yahweh is a loving God, okay. But even that wasn't as universal as Jesus became at one with. So this is the book, The Gospels of Jesus Unplugged. It's published around the world on the 11th of March 2026. And the translations that I give are much clearer. I remove all the Jewish overlays. I remove false things that are said there in the Gospels. And we know they've been manipulated, Matthew in particular. There are bad translations from the Greek traditional translations from the interlinear, so I've had to correct some of those. And I brought Jesus' Gospels into alignment with his main teaching that we can all be children of love and non-violence. Heaven is a world of love and non-violence. And the spiritual creative life force of the heavenly universe and heavenly world that we can all go to in our spiritual body, which we've all got with us right now in the body of flesh, we have to become at one with love and non-violence while we're here in a violent world. That is the teaching of Jesus Christ and Buddha too. They both had what's called the clear light mind experience. Buddha would say you've removed all the adventitious negativities inside your consciousness or mind. Once you remove them, what will happen is you'll find your true nature, which is a clear light mind. You can't hurt anyone anymore. Buddha was a pacifist. Jesus was a pacifist. And still the corrupt church leaders converted everyone back into worshipping Yahweh in the 4th century under Constantine. They turned Christians then back into being Jewish Christians to worship the Yahweh God, and they took the worship away from the divine loving creator. But she's still there, or he's still there through Jesus. But now they've got the two-headed God of Yahweh, the divine loving creator, and Jesus. So they've got multiple gods now without realizing the Jewish religion, the Jewish Christian religion. The Jews don't own up to the truth there. They never say they worship two gods. They should. It would be much better for them if they did. So the Gospels of Jesus Unplugged is published. I'll read the back of the cover here. Jesus taught we can all experience an inner spiritual awakening if we search for it. He called this the treasure hidden in the field of earth or flesh. This is our eternal spiritual identity, empowered only by the loving spiritual life force of our loving spiritual creator. Our bodies of flesh are only temporary and empowered by earthly things, and all flesh dies. Only our spiritual body and soul mind of love lives on to come into the presence of our loving spiritual creator to reap as we have sown. His teachings and spiritual way of love and non-violence can help awaken us all into a new spiritual life here on earth, leading us to the heavenly spiritual world of love after death. Jesus taught we all have two different bodies with us in one. He said that the spiritual body, being eternal, is the most important to be healthy and well in spirit. He provides us with the spiritual instructions to follow and become at one with, to be awakened and transformed into spiritual children of light, of our loving spiritual creator in heaven. And these Gospels, I've removed all the Jewish overlays and distortions. So you'll have a much clearer run through these Gospels to understand exactly what he was saying and teaching. And you too can become enlightened and be exactly the same as him, because he said so in his words. So I'm just a Christian, a pacifist Christian. I've never been a Jewish Christian. I don't bother about the Jewish religion. I don't need it. And I certainly rip out and burn the book of Revelation, because that's quite simply a slanderous book. It's designed to slander Jesus, slander the loving creator, and get Christians to go back and worship the Yahweh God. The book of Revelation is just the Jewish book of Daniel that some apocalyptic Jew undercover agent dropped in at the back of Jesus' teachings of love and non-violence. And they've got Jesus coming back to cause violence, destruction, murder, famine, sickness. That's the Yahweh war God. That's not Jesus. That's a slanderous book. I'm shocked that the Jewish Christian churches still allow that stinking bit of filth to be in next to the Gospels. Cut the Bible in two, put the Jewish religion up on the shelf. You don't need it. And these are the contents of the book. We're up to Matthew. So we'll move on now to Matthew. We're up to, where are we up to here now? Jesus pays the tax. Yep, that's what we're up to. Okay, so I'll read on now with this. This is Matthew part 6. Oh, where are we now? Go back a bit. There we are. Okay. We'll have to go with that. Matthew part 6. So I'm just a Christian. I'm just a follower of Jesus, and I love Buddha's teachings because they were both pacifists. And Jesus also had a clear light mind experience. He even said so. And he also said you've got to clean the dirt out from inside the cup, inside your mind. That's the problem. Exact same thing Buddha said. You've got to clean out the dirt inside your mind. That's the problem. And then Jesus said, once you clean the inside of the cup out, your spiritual body becomes clean. Your mind is clean. You don't hate and want to kill people anymore. That's a satanic false identity. Once you stop doing that and you find your true identity of love and non-violence and live out of it, you can't hurt anyone anymore. Not deliberately. Impossible. Then you're ready to go to the next beautiful world after your body of flesh dies. Jesus then said, if your eye is single, your whole body will be filled with light. It's the same experience. It's the enlightenment. You're filled with this loving light and life force. It's another dimension, another world. You won't see it with your eyeballs of flesh. You've got to feel it through your spiritual body awakening and your spiritual mind awakening. Then you'll connect to the loving spiritual life force flowing into your spiritual body that brings it alive to get ready to leave at the time of death. You will be alive and well after you go through the death experience, and that can be very unpleasant and very painful and excruciating, and you will feel lost while you're going through it for sure. Everyone does who has to go through a really tough death experience. But once this piece of meat in the middle of this physical biological body stops moving, then the umbilical cord is cut between the two bodies. Your spiritual body leaves. It no longer receives any messages from the biological organism that we're all traveling in and with. It's finished. It can't send you any more experiences of any sort, good or bad. Then your spirit's free. And then how your spirit is, what its state of existence is it full of love and kindness? Then you'll move into the heavenly spiritual world. Are you one of the filthy, stinking, satanic warmongers who belong to Hamas, the Israeli army, the Russian army, Iran army, Ukraine army? If you belong to any of those filthy, stinking, satanic armies, you can't get into heaven when your physical body dies. Instead, you'll be suffering the consequences of every child you've killed. You'll be dying like they died, but you'll be in pitch darkness because you're surrounded your beautiful spiritual body of light with stinking filth and dark. But you'll also understand then what it was all about, why you were really here, to get to heaven. Instead, they've created a living hell for themselves, and it will last as long as the filthy, stinking hell they've created for themselves. Don't join any army, navy or air force. Jesus pays tax. Moving on with the book. Matthew 12:24-27. When they came to Capernaum, those who were collecting the 2 drachma tax came to Peter and asked, "Doesn't your teacher pay the 2 drachma tax?" He said, "Yes, he does." And when Peter came to Jesus, he asked Peter, "What do you think, Peter? From whom do the kings of the earth take taxes? From their children or strangers?" Peter said, "From strangers." Jesus then said, "Then the children are exempt. Nevertheless, so we cause no scandal, go to the sea, cast in a hook, and take up the fish that comes out first. And when you have opened its mouth, you will find a piece of money. Take it and give it to them for me and you." Author. Jesus is a fully awoken spiritual child of our loving Creator in heaven. He is no longer of this world. He has little regard for the material earthly order to pay tax, money. But so he and Peter are not charged with an earthly offence. He pays the tax. So he doesn't want to cause strife and trouble. So he'll pay tax, as we all should, of course. I mean, some of it goes to the good, some of it goes to the armaments industry for a lot of countries, which is evil. But we can't do much about that till the governments become good. Who is greatest? Matthew 18:1-6. When they came to Capernaum and were in the house, Jesus asked them what they were discussing amongst themselves along the way. But they were silent, for they were discussing who was the greatest follower amongst them. Jesus called them together and said, "If anyone wants to be first, he must be last of all and servant of all." And he took a child and put him in the middle of them, saying, "Truly I tell you, unless you turn back and become like little children, you will never enter into the heavenly spiritual world. And whoever humbles himself like this child is greatest in the heavenly world. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives the loving Creator who sent me. But whoever causes one of these little ones to sin, it would be better for him if a heavy millstone were hung around his neck, and he was drowned in the depth of the sea. Take heed that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you, in the heavenly spiritual world, their angel guardians are always in the presence of our loving spiritual Creator, who knows all things." Thomas 81, Jesus said, "Let the one who is spiritually rich overcome the material world, and let the one who has power renounce it and serve others." Thomas 4, Jesus said, "The older person, many days old, should not hesitate to ask a little child 7 days old about the realm of life, and this person will live." For many of the first will be last, and will become a single one. Author: Jesus came to serve those in need, both spiritually and physically. He gives us this beautiful dialogue of who we should all be like, using a simple innocent child as the guiding instruction. As adults, we can develop egos and arrogance that block our spiritual love flowing to others and from being at the surface. Jesus tells us to look back to when we were newly alive and at the innocence we all had then, and return into that childlike innocence devoid of ego. It is the ego that creates a duality in our identities, but Jesus teaches we must only have one identity, a spiritual child of love. Lost sheep parable, Matthew 18:11-14. Jesus said, "The spiritual child of humanity has come to save the lost from perishing. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 and go into the mountains to seek after the one that is straying until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, and he rejoices more over that one lost sheep than the 99 that never went astray. And when he returns home, he calls together his friends and neighbours, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost.' Likewise, I tell you, there will be more rejoicing in the heavenly spiritual world over one sinner who changes their ways than over 99 who never sinned. Even so, it is the will and intention of our loving spiritual Creator in the heavenly spiritual world that not even one of these least in spirit should perish." Author: Jesus clearly states that our loving spiritual Creator and Jesus never destroy any of her children lost in darkness. However, we all must reap as we sow. But she continually tries to help us find our way back to who we really are or were. Spiritual children filled with her loving spiritual life force from heaven who can do no wrong and will enter her heavenly spiritual world after death. The end of this statement of Jesus is very important. This destroys the stinking book of Revelation, the filthy, stinking slander. This destroys it. Even so, it is the will and intention of our loving spiritual Creator in the heavenly spiritual world that not even one of the least in spirit should perish or be destroyed. He's saying there quite directly, this loving spiritual being, it does not commit infanticide like the Yahweh, one stinking war god of the Jews who kills. If you don't obey Yahweh one, a murdering war god, that god kills you. It's a war god. If you don't obey Vladimir Putin, he's a living war god, he kills you. Adolf Hitler, you don't obey him, he kills you. They're all war gods. Yahweh one's a war god. Yahweh two, the God of love of the Jews, the forgiving, more peaceful God, that is more like this loving spiritual Creator that Jesus was at one with. So the loving Yahweh is what I call a limited version of the ultimate version that Jesus found. The complete oneness with love and this loving spiritual being whose entire mind is love, who can only create loving things because this loving being is only love. Therefore, this loving being can only create loving things to share the love, which is her loving life force in us, to share with other children who are also only filled with love, created by love. So you become pure love. But the thing is, Jesus is trying to help us all understand, but you've got to do it now, before your biological body of flesh dies. Your biological body of flesh is dualistic. It can love and hate with this body. You can kill and save with this body. The mind of this body is vulnerable. It's even vulnerable to infections. A serious fungal or yeast or bacterial infection can change your personality. You're poisoned by the toxins. Of course, people who take a lot of drugs, they're poisoned, self-poisoned by the toxins, and their personalities change. This is a chemical construct, but your spiritual body is not physical and it's not chemical. It's a spiritual identity with a spiritual life force in another dimension that's called the spiritual dimension, the spiritual world of love. When you're there, even though it may seem very different, and we may all have bodies that are glowing and very, just beautiful and all the rest of it, it'll seem that that's the normal reality. There isn't any other reality. But it'll be quite different from having bodies of, bones and flesh that die. And, I used to say to my sister Joan before she died, I don't think there's any toilet paper in heaven, Joan. She said, no. She'd lived 73 years. She was crippled. She was born with cerebral palsy. Her whole life was lived in a wheelchair. And so for her, people had to take her to the toilet and all the rest of it and things like that and shower her. And yeah, she said, no, we don't have any of that problem in heaven because we have spiritual bodies. And her spirit was beautiful and shining like the sun. So her body was crippled, but her spirit was not. And Jesus is always saying that's the most important thing of all. Don't cripple your spiritual body. Don't cover your spiritual body in stinking filth because you can't get into heaven. Your body of flesh is going to die anyway, whether you're an Olympic athlete or like my sister crippled with cerebral palsy, or you're just 101 years old like my mother's body was when she died. It's just disintegrating. It's frailing and failing. Either way, every one of our physical bodies has to disintegrate and die and stop. But the spirit lives on and reaps as it sows. So this sheep parable is a typical one that the Jewish Christians all ignore. They ignore this end saying of Jesus. No, they say Jesus is coming back on the clouds to destroy all the people who don't believe in him and his God. And they don't realise they're talking about the stinking war God, Yahweh of the Jews. They don't even realise they're saying it. They don't even know who that God is. And this figure on the clouds coming back, it sure isn't Jesus. It's a satanic war God figure. I try to tell them, but they don't listen. So I'm just doing it on YouTube for anyone who's interested to know the truth. A sinning brother or sister, Matthew 18:15-18. Jesus said, if your brother or sister sins against you, go and confront them about their fault between you and them alone. If they listen and acknowledge their fault, you have restored your friendship again. But if they refuse to listen, take with you 1 or 2 witnesses to confirm the facts of the matter. If they still refuse to admit to sinning against you, tell it to the church. But if they refuse to listen to the church, then accept that they have estranged themselves from you. However, if your brother or sister sins against you, confront them, and if they say sorry, then forgive them. And if they sin against you 7 times in a day, and 7 times say sorry, still forgive them every time. And whoever is bound against the earth will be bound from entering heaven. And whoever is loosed from the earth will be loosed into heaven. Author, we must always forgive those who sin against us as the first rule. Then we can try to restore that break in trust by talking it over with the one who committed the act against us. Out of love for them, we hope to guide them into seeing the wrong that has damaged their spirit and your friendship and restore them to good spiritual health. But if they choose not to admit they're wrong, or if they chose not to admit they're wrong, we must accept the loss of their trusted friendship, but still love them. Jesus then comments, if we are bound to the material world, it prevents entry to the heavenly world. But loosening yourself from things of the material world, including sin, will allow you to enter the heavenly spiritual world. Perfectly logical, perfectly intelligent. This is intelligent faith. This is an intelligent, logical understanding of the spiritual, otherworldly teachings of Jesus. They must make sense. That's why the Jewish Christians are in big trouble, because they mixed the new wine in with the old wine, stirred it all up. Jesus said, don't do that. You won't understand what I'm talking about anymore. Parts of it you will, parts of it you won't. I never mixed it in with the Jewish religion. I'm not interested in the Jewish religion much at all. No more than any other religion. Matthew 18:21. Forgive, forgive, forgive. Peter came to Jesus and asked, Master, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus replied, I do not say up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. For the heavenly spiritual world is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. But he was not able to pay his master. He was not able to pay, and his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he owned, so payment could be made. The servant fell down before his master, saying, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you all." Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him all the debt. But when that servant went out and found a fellow servant who owed him 100 denarii, he laid his hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, "Pay me what you owe me." And his fellow servant fell down at his feet and begged him, saying, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you all." And he would not, but went and threw him into prison until he could pay all the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had been done, they were very grieved and came and told their master all that had been done. Then the master called back the servant who he forgave and said to him, "You wicked servant, I forgave all that debt because you begged me. Should you not also have had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you?" And his master was angry and delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that he owed. So also shall our loving spiritual Creator not be able to forgive you your sins if you fail to forgive from your heart others who sin against you. Author. Forgiveness is a vital characteristic we must all have as a spiritual child of our loving Creator. Just as we ask our loving Creator to forgive us when we stray into sin against her perfect way of love, so we must do the same for others. The torturers mentioned by Jesus are the burning realizations of our sins that we must undergo after death. When you're delivered to the torturers to pay the debt, if you haven't repented while you're here in the earth world, you'll be tortured by your own conscience. So the torturers mentioned by Jesus are the burning realizations of our sins we must undergo after death if we have not cleansed ourselves of sin before death. This is the spiritual law of reaping as we sow. It's quite interesting how Peter was counting the number of times which he may have been, like obviously heard the last episode there where Jesus was saying if someone even 7 times, if they commit a sin against you 7 times, well, say sorry to them 7 times. I mean, forgive them 7 times if they're sorry to you, sorry. If they say sorry to you, sorry, what I meant was sorry. If they say sorry to you 7 times in a day, forgive them 7 times. So that was in the last saying. But now, so Peter's got that in his mind, 7 times. So is that the limit, is it? Like, is that, do we go to that limit? Did you mean that that's the limit? This is sort of like a follow-on question. Oh, so if I do it 7 times, can I hate them then? And Jesus goes, no, you don't get it. 7 times 70, you become at one with forgiveness. You become a spiritual child. Shift out of your physical identity. Come into the spiritual heavenly identity. We have to forgive everyone who's in the darkness and hurting others because they're lost. No need to hurt them. They're already hurting themselves. So you can see how that follows on, Peter. This may have been actually part of the one saying, obviously. So should I just, I'll count 7 times and then I can hate them. No. Divorce and marriage. Matthew 19:3-9. The Pharisees came to test Jesus, asking, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason?" Jesus replied, "Have you not read that our loving Creator made them male and female? And for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one in body. A man and his wife are naturally joined together in this way, and therefore should remain so. However, if one of them gives reason for divorcing, such as infidelity or abuse, then they have the right to break the bond of marriage." Children of heaven, Matthew 19:13-15. Then little children were brought to Jesus that he might lay his hands on them and bless them. But when the disciples saw them coming, they stopped them. When Jesus saw what they were doing, he was angry with them and said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for ones such as these will be in the heavenly spiritual world. Truly, I say to you, whoever does not receive the heavenly spiritual world like a little child will by no means enter in." And he laid his hands upon them and blessed them. Author. Jesus often uses the analogy that we must become as unpretentious and humble as little children to become spiritual children in heaven. It's a really perfect analogy. We know that when we grow up, children who are beautiful when they're young can still be very beautiful adults. We know that. I've met people like that. I met children like that. But we also know when little children grow up, they can be influenced by other forces, peer group forces. They can get tangled up in evil things. They can be tempted to do bad things. And before you know it, they've moved into a shadow identity, a false identity of their own imaginations, committing evil, doing wrong, etc. Arrogance, that sort of thing. They might look very respectable. I'm a specialist doctor, but they can be as arrogant as you could ever believe and look down on patients like they're just dirt. So it doesn't mean you're robbing banks or anything. You can still be in big trouble just by being arrogant. Now, a little child's not like that. A little child can't be arrogant because they don't know anything. They have to ask you, what's the moon made out of? And if you said cheese, if they were very young, they'd believe you. That's how innocent they are. Whereas once arrogance comes in, which comes through ego and false identity, or the identity of the flesh becomes more primary in your little earthly temporary life than your spiritual identity of love and honesty and goodness and kindness and treating everyone like a friend, that's the true identity. So Jesus is always trying to point out to us that we've got two identities. Only one of them's the true identity, the other's false. But we express ourselves through our personality. I'm not saying you don't have an identity or personality, that's different. Everyone has an introverted, extroverted personality, gifted at different things, introverted, extroverted, some are good at this, some are good at that, and you express love through your personality, which is unique, and only you can express love in that way. That's the beauty of it all. It's, in musical terms, you'd say it's variations on a theme. When a composer writes a beautiful melody of love, he'll do maybe 3 or 4 variations on a theme of love. So the melody will be there in the next 3 variations, but slightly altered. But enough, not altered too much so that you don't hear the same melody of love, but it's presented in a different way. That's you and I. I express love in my way, you express love in your way. She does, he does, they do, they do. Everyone is able to express this same love in a slightly different way, which is the extraordinary wonder of creation in the spiritual world. And even as a gardener, that's been my career, the number of different flowers, they're all flowers, but the variations on a theme of flower is amazing, it's astonishing, unbelievable, beautiful concoctions of flower petals and shapes and colours. It's a variation on the theme of a flower. And you and I have variations on the theme of love. The question is, are you at one with love or not? Are you filled with love? You have to be filled with your spiritual body. You'll express it through your personality, but your personality, your physical, biological body and brain, mind, and your DNA structure that does give us our personality, the DNA structure does do that, to express love. So it's different. But the thing is, the physical body's secondary. It's there to express love in the way your personality helps you do it, as the character that you are. Oh, he's a funny character. Oh, he's always very quiet. He's very placid, that character, isn't he? Very placid character. Oh, gee, that person's so boisterous all the time. That's their character. As long as everyone's expressing love, you'll be in heaven. So character and personality, that's not ego. Ego's linked to false identity. Vladimir Putin, he's a stinking, filthy, black identity. False. Netanyahu, the entire Israeli army, the Hamas army, or the Russian army, the Ukraine army, Iran killers, the army. They're all false figures now, false identities. And they all collapse with the death of their physical body. Those identities have no life in them. But the consequences of what they're doing will have consequences on their spiritual body after they die. And they'll all be in layers and layers and layers of a living, burning realization of hell about what they did when they were back here on earth. They don't know about that. They're so ignorant and they're so lost, and they worship Satan as in a war god anyway. So what war gods do? Kill, murder, steal. That's what they've always done. So they don't know about the wailing and gnashing of teeth. Jesus warned everyone, you'll be sorry, you'll be wailing and screaming. Once your body of flesh dies, it'll be too late to say sorry to all the people you've hurt or murdered or killed or robbed. Too late. So, and that world exists, or let's say that experience exists, that hellish experience, just as much as the real spiritual world does exist. But yeah, you've got to be filled with love to get in. I'll do one more. Rich young man, Matthew 19:16-26. A man came up to Jesus and asked him, "Good teacher, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life?" Jesus said, "Why do you call me good? No one is wholly good but one, our loving spiritual creator of love. But if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments." He asked, "Which ones?" Jesus replied, "You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not lie. Honor your mother and father and love your neighbor as yourself." And he said, "Teacher, all these things I have followed from my youth." And Jesus looked at him, saying, "There is one thing you still lack. Sell all that you own and distribute it to the poor, and you will have treasure in the heavenly spiritual world, and come and follow me." But when he heard this, he became sorrowful, for he had a great number of earthly possessions. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Assuredly I say to you, how hard it will be for those who have earthly riches to enter the heavenly spiritual world." And Jesus said, "I tell you again, just how hard it is for those who trust in earthly riches to enter the heavenly spiritual world. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the heavenly spiritual world." And the disciples were astonished and surprised at his words, for rich Jews were considered especially blessed by their God Yahweh. The disciples then asked, "Who then can be saved, if not these blessed with riches?" Jesus replied, "As only a mortal man, it is impossible. But for one who is with our loving spiritual Creator, all things are possible." Peter asked Jesus what they who left their homes to follow him will have. Jesus replied, "Everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children to follow and share my spiritual way with others will receive a vast amount more than these things by inheriting eternal life in the heavenly spiritual world of our loving Creator. For many who are first on earth will be last, and the last will be first." Author. Jesus again draws a definite line between the earthly, material, temporary world and the eternal, heavenly, spiritual world. If we only spend our life accumulating earthly, material things, then we will have missed out on accumulating the loving spiritual life force from heaven that we need to be spiritually alive when our body of flesh dies and returns to the earth from which it was formed. That is what empowers our spirits and souls to have true eternal life in heaven after our material body of flesh dies. Once attached to material wealth, it is like an addiction that goes nowhere and can destroy our opportunity to prepare to be spiritual children in heaven after death. So, rich young man. Of course, we well and truly know how the material cult worship money. Billionaires are considered, "Oh gee, I wish I was a billionaire." Don't wish that. Unless you're going to give all that money to the poor and the homeless and elderly homes, nursing homes, poverty, countries that are starving, crops failing. If you're going to give that billionaire money to others in need, great, do it. But the trouble is, all the time you've spent becoming a billionaire, you've been greedy doing it, and you've lived out of the flesh only. And you might have a little bit of love for your own children or something, but it's not spiritual. Your primary identity is flesh, money. You worship money, that's your God. Well, you don't take that with you, you're empty. It's the spiritual love towards everyone, the equanimity. It's like the woman who put the little copper coin in at the treasury while all the rich Jews were putting in denarii by the bucket load because they were rich. But Jesus said, no, she put in more because that's all she had to give. That tiny little bit of money was everything she had, but she gave it to the temple, to God, In other words, our spiritual identity is primary. The most important thing you have is your spiritual body and soul, mind of love, because it's going to leave when your body dies, and you will only realize it when it happens. You'll be out of the body, and that's when you'll understand what this was all about, this place. Have you been filled with love? Are you filled with the light of love? Non-violence, caring for others equally. Did you share what extra wealth you had? You didn't hoard it like these billionaires do. That horrible. Did you make sure you looked out for those who are in need? That's all you have to do. Just share the material stuff. It's all dust anyway. You're not taking any of it with you. And the more you use it for a loving purpose, the more your spiritual body gets stronger and stronger and stronger and more filled with beautiful, loving life force. And then when the body of flesh dies, oh, bang, you're out of the body and you're filled and alive with all the love that you were given from heaven to use, and you used it. That's the talents parable. The guy who had 10 used it and he had 10 more. The guy who had 5 used it and he had 5 more. The guy who had one talent, one amount to use for loving spiritual things, he buried it in the dirt, in the earth. He became a material child. All he had was this little bit to give back that he started with. It didn't grow. He didn't mature. His spiritual body didn't fully come alive. He had the seed of it, but he didn't let it grow. He stopped it growing and buried it in the dirt. It's a very telling comment of Jesus. Covered it in dirt, the material world, you see. They're the ones who, hear the words, but the thorns grow up and strangle all the spiritual fruits. They just like the riches that they get, indulging in that until they die, or they're too old to use it, or they get sick and they can't enjoy them anymore. It's ridiculous. We should be living more like the Amish in America. Bless them. Well, I'll stop there and I'll go on to the next part. I speak from the heart, so I'm not a theologian or a university professor. I'm not the Pope. I'm not a minister or a leader of some church group or Jewish Christian church, and I'm not a Jewish Christian anyway. And that's what's different about me. I'm just a Christian. I love Jesus and Buddha. Jesus had an even higher level, and I can give you an example of that. Buddha's is pure love. Jesus is pure love. The mind's become pure love. But when the Dalai Lama was in Melbourne lecturing, some years back now, 15 or years or so ago, I was there at the lecture, and I met him briefly, but he said at the beginning of the lecture to the audience, the people, I'm a Buddhist monk. I've come to teach about Buddhist teachings, so you're here to hear that, so of course I'll tell you about Buddhist teachings. But this is Australia, and of course this country was Aboriginal for thousands of years, and they had their own spiritual teachings. Then the Europeans came, and then you had predominantly a Judeo-Christian country for hundreds of years, few hundred years. He said, now, Christians following Jesus, we Buddhists should learn from Christians who follow Jesus' teachings, because Christians go out on the streets, they help the poor, the homeless, drug addicts, they build schools and hospitals, they run charities, they bring this love to those in great need. We should learn from our Christian brothers and sisters. We Buddhists should learn from them. Now, Buddha and Jesus both had a clear like mind, but Buddha didn't over-teach about going out on the streets to help others. He said, come here and experience this incredible loving mind that you have inside yourself, the treasure hidden in the field. Buddha understood that, and that's what he taught, and you can experience it with the Buddhist teachings. Jesus said, yeah, once you've experienced it now, right, now go out in the vineyard and help those who have fallen down, particularly those who are outcasts, sinners, the sick, those poor, the ones who are spat on. Bring love to them. Love them. That's how pure this love is. And you must go and do it because no one else is doing it for them. But you're a spiritual child of heaven now, so you can do it and be an example to the other arrogant children. So it's love in action. So Buddha's sort of like a passive love, and then Jesus goes, oh, wait a minute, I'll put that into action. I'll put this singularity of love that he and Buddha both experienced. Oh, wait a minute, I'll go and help all these lepers and these sick people and these outcasts and sinners and prostitutes. I'll go and hang out with them and say, listen, you're as valuable as anybody. Just straighten up your life now and you'll be in this other world. You won't suffer anymore. So it's a beautiful thing. So the Dalai Lama recognizes that sort of what I would say is a higher level of manifestation of the clear light mind in this material dangerous world. So I was really pleased when I heard him say that. I thought, exactly what I think. Must have a chat to him about it one day if he's still around. As always, love your way to heaven. It's the only way you're going to get in. Or if you want to, hate your way to hell. Your choice. Choose the way to heaven. Love. Bye.